Good morning, good morning, good morning. We're a little cozy in here. We're a little cozy. That's okay. If anyone in the dining area wants to come in, let us know. If you have an empty chair, will you raise your hand at your table? Oh, you're saving that one? Okay. If you have an empty chair, there's chairs on the wall, and then we have 3 seats inside. If anyone else wants to come in before we get started. 2? Yes. You want to sit at the table? Yes, sir. Right over here. They're waving at you. They're coming. All right. Any more? We have one more. One. Oh, no. You're fine. No. Stay here with your woman. No. Okay. Is that you're getting to your seat? All right. Are you all good? Okay. Okay. And then you have one? Okay. She's moving. We got one more here. One more. If one more person wants to sit. And then there's 2 back here. 2. You're probably going to have to sit there, Ariel. It's a good problem to have, we're all... Okay, and then one last housekeeping. If you don't mind silencing your phones. Silencing your phones. And then when we have the Q&A session, make sure someone is has a mic when you ask your question, okay? We want to make sure. Oh, and he said stand up too, if you can. If you can't, that's okay, but make sure you have a mic so we can all hear your questions. Okay? All right. Next up is Ms. Cece Manzanera. She is the administrator and the glue that holds us all together here at the ADRC. Welcome.
Yes, welcome. Good morning, everyone. Is this on? Can you hear me okay? I'm loud enough without a microphone. So first and foremost, just wanted to welcome everyone here this morning. Thank you for braving the elements to be here with us. We know that the weather is often a reason why people can't make it. So it's a pleasure to see the room pretty full. As you know, we hold this meeting annually, and Cornelia, I have no sense of what number this is, but I'm guessing it's past the 10-year mark, certainly, and maybe almost a 20-year mark that we've been holding this event, which is really meant to honor those of you who participate in our program and to provide an opportunity, first of all, to spend some time getting to know one another, since many of you in this room participate in the study, but also a chance to honor those who are no longer with us. So we'd like to, first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for your participation in the study. And thank you for allowing us the opportunity to give you some updates on not only what's going on in the research space, but also the clinical space, and letting you know what's on the horizon for the future. For those of you who've been with us for some time, we do start this program with a remembrance ceremony for those who are no longer with us. And for that ceremony, I'd like to go ahead and welcome Dr. Chad Hales, Dr. Monica Parker, and Dr. Marla Gearing up for that part of the program. And thanks again for joining.
So, one of the things that's very, very important to us, we're really, really excited about having all of you here and to say thank you for your continued volunteerism in our research projects, because that's what it is. It is volunteerism. And it's volunteerism that allows us to develop better methods for, first of all, diagnosing and treating Alzheimer's, for better understanding what undergirds good, healthy aging versus not so healthy aging. And for those of you who participated with us for a long time and have decided that it's important enough for you to continue this research beyond the time where you're no longer walking amongst all of us, and maybe think it's worthwhile to donate your brain and your spinal cord so that we can further study Alzheimer's and its effect on people and better develop and refine our techniques for diagnosis and treatment, we'd like to honor you. So at this time, Dr. Chad Hales has, we do this ceremony, and Chad kind of leads it. Dr. Gearing and I kind of help support and honor a candle in honor of those people who have participated in our research for our longitudinal study. That's what we call it. Over years, these people have volunteered for many years. And when they're no longer with us and no longer need their brains, and that's what my mother used to say, she said, if I don't need it anymore, you can have it. So we are going to honor them for making this donation and giving us this gift. Dr. Hales. Okay. First, to be honored, Miss Frida Jane Ellis. We're supposed to have their pictures. Mr. Richard Rye Folger. Cheryl Guthrie Hogan. William Hauser. Lawrence Johnson. Karen McClure. Robert Mark McLeod. Carol Overend. Nelson Seacrest. Eleanor Silver. And finally, Allenstein Drusilla Willis. That's my mom.
Again, to reiterate, thanks for you guys being here today. My goal over the next couple of minutes is just to share a couple of thoughts. You'll see some themes of hope, maybe hear a little bit about vulnerability, and then we'll talk a little bit about reflection towards the end. You saw the names of several folks listed up here, and I'd like to highlight a couple of our research participants, more in general terms, but in thinking about what these people provide and give to the field as part of this whole process of what we call research and working to identify new therapies and approaches. One of our participants, little did he know, was in one of the pivotal trials for one of the first Alzheimer's disease modifying therapies. And during those trials, for several years, was actually on lecanemab, which is a medication that you'll hear about a little bit later in our presentation, but well before being available as an FDA-approved therapy. Both he and his family understood the importance of research, participating in research, and helping to drive the field forward. One of our other participants, unfortunately, died a little bit young, partly due to an underlying familial neurodegenerative disorder called frontotemporal dementia. Symptoms started in her 40s. Patients like that, donating their brain, allowing us to try to understand these processes better, may not necessarily help for that individual, but truly have promise for helping others And she understood that, and her family understood that as well. And thinking about those that are still around, her affected sister, her affected first cousin, the next two generations that have possible affected pre-symptomatic individuals who may also carry those genes. They, like the others, they understood the importance, and like all of you, understand the importance of our mission here. So there's hope from their participation. And there's also gratitude that we provide both for them and their families. This takes a team effort in research. What about vulnerability? Why is that important? Well, we had a pretty interesting, poignant juxtaposition of vulnerability within the last couple of years. I'm going to ask for a show of hands here. You don't have to volunteer, but who may happen to be a friend of or a fan of the Marvel universe? Anybody? We got some hands. All right, we got some hands out there. Who's an even bigger fan of the mighty Thor? And okay, we got a couple hands. So as you may know, Marvel Comics, they've done all these movies. You've got Thor in a bunch of these movies, and I don't know, I think probably Thor Ragnarok probably displays him the best towards the end, where he just really kicks everybody's tail when he gets really angry. Pretty amazing power. But the reason I bring this up is, as you may also know, there was this really interesting juxtaposition of reality with entertainment. He also participated in a documentary series called Limitless. Has anybody seen that? So I'm talking about Chris Hemsworth here, the actual actor who played Thor. Has anybody seen Limitless? It's a 6 or 7 series on Disney. Nobody. Wow. It is worth the Disney subscription to watch the episodes. But I will give you a spoiler for one of those episodes. So in one of those episodes, Chris Hemsworth, Thor, who, as you know, met with Dr. Adia, who's this kind of, well, he's a physician, but also talks about what are things you can do to improve your lifespan. And a lot of what he talks about is very reasonable. But in one of the episodes, they looked at Chris Hemsworth's genetic risk for lots of things. As you know, there are lots of genetic panels. You can go online and order it, and it tells you risk for this, risk for that. And in that episode, and of course they talked with him about the episode before they gave this revelation. But one of the things they tested him for was ApoE. Many of you may know apolipoprotein E and have heard about it in the context of Alzheimer's disease. It's a risk factor, a genetic susceptibility risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. And he discovered that he carries 2 copies of apolipoprotein E4, which in his 40s is probably not an issue. But as he gets older, his risk for Alzheimer's disease is really high. 13, 14 times as high as a normal individual. And if he develops it, potentially will develop Alzheimer's disease a decade or 2 earlier than he would have otherwise. So he's in his 40s, and now he has this information. I'm not going to speak too much to that, and E4 will come up a little bit later in our conversation. But the point being, we all have vulnerabilities. And this is just one of those examples of mighty Thor, person, strong individual, but has these genetic risk susceptibilities that we have to be able to find ways to combat this as we move forward. And we're only going to be able to do that with your help and with research and moving the field forward. Finally, I'll talk briefly about reflection. We're all on this journey. Right? We're all on a journey, and sometimes it's difficult to maybe take a little bit of time and just feel in the present moment. You can read about that as being important, right? Just being able to be calm, listen, hear the rain outside. I had a great example of this. I was at a recent meeting a couple weeks ago near San Diego. and had the opportunity to run in the Torrey Pines Natural State Preserve. Has anybody been there before? Couple of people. Excellent. If you've been anywhere on the Pacific coast, you know that there are these little preserves along the way. And if you've been there, you know you don't really have an option. You have to be in the moment at the grandeur and the power that those places hold. They're also an interesting metaphor because you will also note that at the trailhead for most of those places, there is a sign. And that sign says, caution, falling rocks, shifting earth, big surf, you may die. Have a nice day. You know? So when you journey out on those trails, just, be in the moment because you never know when the earthquake might hit. But anyway, but that particular day, we know it was near sunset, and I mean, it was glorious. I mean, you can hear the crunch of the sand under your feet as you're running on the trails, occasional bird flitting in the brush, occasional rabbit. The sun's kind of starting to dip down as you get down towards the beach. Got these huge walls up on behind you, and you're hoping that a rogue wave doesn't come at that point. The beach is not sand. It's these large kind of baseball-sized pebbles that make this really interesting crunching sound when you step on them. There's seagulls kind of wandering around, maybe flying in the air. You can smell the breeze. You see some people wandering on the rocks, and you kind of secretly hope one of them falls in, but you really don't want anybody to get hurt. But as the sun goes down, it just kind of hangs there for a minute, right? Just kind of hangs there on the horizon. And then, of course, as it continues to dip down, you eventually see the last few rays as they kind of fall behind the undulations of the sea. It's a powerful moment, right? And thinking about just being there, smelling that air, hearing under your footsteps. Of course, it reminded me of an important story, which is also another great metaphor. I think some of you may recognize it. In the great green room, there was a telephone and a red balloon and a picture of the cow jumping over the moon. There were 3 little bears sitting on chairs and 2 little kittens and a pair of mittens. A little toy house and a young mouse, and a comb and a brush, and a bowl full of mush, and a quiet old lady who was whispering, hush. Good night, room. Good night, moon. Good night, cow jumping over the moon. Good night, light. Good night, light, and the red balloon. Good night, bears, and good night, chairs. Good night, kittens. Good night, mittens. Good night, clocks. Good night, socks. Good night, little house. Good night, mouse. Good night, comb, and good night, brush. Good night, nobody. And good night, mush. Good night to the old lady whispering, hush. Good night, stars. Good night, air. Good night, noises everywhere.
Thank you, Dr. Hales. Thank you, Dr. Gearing. At this time, we turn this part of the program over to give you an update and give you some information about what we're doing at the Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. So I'd like our researchers and our faculty to come forward. Dr. Alan Levy, director of our Goizueta Institute and co-founder of our Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Dr. James Law, professor and director of our clinical core. Dr. Felicia Goldstein, co-director of our clinical core. We want you to sit right here, guys. Right there. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Dr. Todd Gold, Dr. Eric Johnson, Dr. Antoine Trammell, Dr. Dukang Q, and Dr. Let's see, did I get them all? I think we're all here. Okay, Alan, James, Todd, Chad, Eric, Felicia. Okay, we have one mic, guys, so you get to share. So I think I'm going to start. You want us to use this now? Okay. Okay, we're going to start with the big boss and let him go down the way and give you an update on what we're doing. So one of the things that I think is really important for everybody to appreciate is the Goizueta Institute that's in development and is well-formed began with our Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. So if you go Google Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center and you learn about research, that's part of what we do, but it's not all of what we do. The Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center has given birth to quite a few different research enterprises that connect all of the research community in the state of Georgia, not just at Emory, but at the Georgia Tech, at Georgia University of Georgia, Mercer, Georgia State, and other places. So Dr. Levy, can you kind of tell our audience a little bit more about our Goizueta Institute and what role they can further play?
No.
Yes, you can. Yes.
Yes, I'll do whatever Monica says. But first, I just want to welcome everybody and thank you. So good morning, and from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of our entire incredible team, thank you for partnering with us. As you know, it's been an absolutely remarkable year. We're making tons of progress, and all of us recognize that none of that progress would occur without your partnership and involvement with us to help us move forward the research. So first of all, let me just thank all of you. A big round of applause. So let me try to really quickly answer Monica's question. And first of all, we are one of 37 national Alzheimer's disease research centers. All of us, that's what we do. And so what's happening here is getting replicated across the country. Of course, we're doing it better than anybody, right? But we really work together as a team, and a lot of the progress is really a team effort. This has been, I guess, around 15 years of the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Is that right?
2005.
Close. 20. I want that blood test and that new treatment right away. So we are going in this spring to renew our 5-year grant. So again, this is a growing network. But the success we've had, I think what we really learned more than anything is that Alzheimer's disease is not a single disease. All of us in this room are different. All of us are affected by a disease like Alzheimer's disease differently, and that there are lots of things happening. And we have to understand on a very personal level what it means to have Alzheimer's disease, what our risks are before we get it, so we can mitigate getting any risk to lessen the chance of getting the disease, and to make sure the treatments we get are appropriate for us each and safe and effective as possible. And so to really make progress with Alzheimer's disease, we want to leverage what we're doing here. We're expanding our efforts across Emory, and that's what the Goizueta Institute's all about, getting people to work together across Parkinson's disease, stroke, ALS, other brain diseases, and also the psychiatric diseases like depression and anxiety disorders. And so all we're doing is the same thing we're doing here and expanding that as the Goizueta Institute. So thank you, Monica. I was going to give a little bit about diagnosis, but I think we want to have mostly time for questions and answers. Jim, do you want to make any comments before we move on?
Yeah, so you didn't do your job, damn it. So I queued him up with the softball. I said, you can give a brief update about all the really exciting advances that have happened in the last year that a lot of you have been reading about. And there have been some tremendous advances. This has really been a banner year in terms of what's happened in actually delivering some of the advances from our research to the clinical arena. So a lot of you know that the first meaningful treatment to slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease received standard FDA approval last year. You've also been reading about the advances in some of these blood tests. I will caution you that a lot of what you read, whenever stuff gets into the media, whether it's the media relations people from the universities or companies or just news trying to get clickbait, just be cautious. Some of those things are still not quite ready for prime time, but they do represent major advances. So we do hope that we will be able to translate some of these findings into early diagnostic tests, and then we got to figure out how to use those. So huge advances. I asked our other boss, Cece, to give me a list of any talking points that she wanted me to cover, and there are a couple of things that she wanted me to touch on. One really important area, and some of the others here, including Dr. Trammell and others, may be able to address some of these questions. But there's a really important new questionnaire that you're going to be getting that we're implementing sort of across the nation, and that is to investigate something called social determinants of health. So Chad was talking about the ApoE gene and other genetic risks. And sure, we know that how many of you have heard me tell you how to avoid getting Alzheimer's disease? All right, so I won't tell that joke again. All right. So
They want to hear it again.
choose your parents very wisely and don't get old. All right. And the reason you have to choose your parents wisely is because there's a major genetic influence in age-related diseases, including Alzheimer's disease. But I think a lot of us believe that the life experience that we have from the time of birth to the time we're in our 70s and 80s and 90s has a huge impact. And I think it's going to prove to be a bigger impact than the genetic risks. So this is, we talk a lot about disparities. We've actively, intentionally focused on engagement of non-white communities because most of the research has been done in white communities. And the exposures of our Black friends in large measure may be different because of the societal conditions in which we all grow up. And that kind of exposure over the course of decades has to have an enormous impact on how we age, including how our brains age. So you're going to be getting some questionnaires about social determinants of health. There are a lot of them floating around. The one that I think we're circulating is too damn long. So we're not going to chase you and make you do this, but we're going to find other means of capturing this type of data so that we can factor that into understanding what happens to diverse populations as we age. There's a couple of procedural things that are going to change. We're going to do some cardiovascular measures every other year, along with those of you who are in the longitudinal biomarker collection. In addition to the MRI and blood and spinal fluid, we're also going to start doing cardiovascular measures to look at cardiovascular physiology and how that may impact Alzheimer's and other related illnesses. And then the last thing that I'm going to comment on, I actually had an email from one of our participants who wasn't going to be able to attend, asking me if I was going to talk about this. And this is something that I've mentioned a couple of times in different settings. But how many of you actually know your ApoE genetic status? So, number of you. Those of you who donate blood and spinal fluid, we do certain tests on those samples in a research context. But those things become increasingly relevant. So we're always careful about how we share information that may not be clinically actionable. So what I mean by clinically actionable, if we see something on your scan or something else that indicates that you need some type of intervention, or if we see blockages in your carotid arteries that look extreme, we're going to alert you to that because that's something that you might need to do something about. Your ApoE status is fixed the moment that that little sperm hits that little egg, and that's it. You're done. You can't change it forever. And so that information becomes important because it alters your risk. So I hope Chris doesn't get Alzheimer's disease, and he may not, even though he has 2 copies of that E4 gene. And so we have to make sure that people understand what the genetic tests mean, what the spinal fluid tests mean. But we've also felt quite strongly that that's your data, and if you want it, you should get it. And so We've gone a good ways towards developing a methodology to provide education so people don't misinterpret and misunderstand that information. But those of you who wish to know that, you're going to get the opportunity to get that information disclosed to you. So hopefully that final IRB material will be approved, and then we'll move that forward. So with that, I'm going to shut up now, and we want to have time for questions that you all might have.
Yeah,
So-
before moving on to questions, I just want to ask DeChong to mention one other thing. So another new testing that we're going to be adding for many of you is brain imaging. Many haven't had brain imaging in the past, some have. But there have been major advances in a couple types of brain imaging, so we're going to be increasing that request this year. And maybe to John.
Thank you. My name is DeChan Chu. I have seen brain images of some of you. It's great to see the faces. So we do different kinds of images. So there's a imaging called MRI image that allows us to see the integrity of neurons and whether there's atrophy going on in your brain. And recently, there's a lot of advancement in this field that allows us to study the amyloid and tau deposition in the brains. So these are called positron emission tomography or PET images. So it involves injecting some radioactive tracer. It's relatively small amount. So it's all these are approved by IRB to make sure it's within the guideline of radiation safety. So these images allows us to see the amounts of amyloid and tau deposition in different parts of your brain. So it's very important. And there's a national consortium. And Alan mentioned there are 37 centers. And really there's a big NIH-funded grant to push these technology across all the centers. So you will be hearing from us about inviting you to participate in these additional brain scans. So we'd love to see additional brain images of yours.
On that note, we're going to be able to get our genetic information. Are you going to give us information about the PET scans that you're asking us to do?
Yeah, so we hadn't included the PET scans, but yeah, I see no reason why that should be any different. We just want to be sure that you understand what it does and does not mean. So, hopefully Chris Helmsworth knows that just because he has E4 and E4 doesn't necessarily mean he's going to get Alzheimer's disease, right? And so he's a pretty healthy guy, except when he does that bloated out. Which movie was that when he was like all fat and out of shape? But hopefully he'll be well, and so no misinterpretation. One last thing, I would be remiss. We, of course, treasure the donations of all of those who have passed and provided the donations of their participation in their brains after death. And I'm sorry, I got lost and went to Executive Park. I missed the first few minutes. I need to have my cognitive testing again. And so I missed that section, but I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Dr. Monica Parker, who's been so instrumental in growing the diversity of our research participant base, and was very committed. And in this past past month, she really made the decision to make an ultimate sort of continuing effort to support the work by being sure that her mother, who passed, donated her brain for research. And so, Monica, I'm so sorry for your loss, but we love you and we thank you so much.
Thank you all. So, questions? Cornelia, if you have some questions. We have clinicians up here who see you in clinic. We have researchers here who see you in clinic and in our research studies. So if you have questions, please ask. Stand up and say your question out loud. Please, if I have to repeat it, I will.
Okay, hi. With all the research going on, is there any research that is looking at the cause of Alzheimer's? Because I remember growing up, I'm a baby boomer like a lot of us, and my grandparents, they never talked about any of their friends, and all the friends of theirs I knew, they didn't have those kind of issues. They might have a little memory loss or something like that, but we never heard about anybody completely losing their mind.
Sure. So my name is Eric Johnson. That's a great question. So I think there are a couple ways you could think about this. First of all, we know that Alzheimer's disease is strongly influenced by age, right? So we are all living longer. And the longer you live, the higher your risk is for Alzheimer's disease. So by the time someone reaches in their upper 80s or 90-year-old, their risk is about 50% that they will develop Alzheimer's disease. So that's, I think, one explanation when you think about, well, it's more, I hear about this more often now than I did when I was growing up with my parents. I think, the other thing is that it has become, because more people are getting older and at higher risk for Alzheimer's disease, it's become more common in our public discourse about the disease and become more prominent in the news media and in our discussions. And I think that's great. That's a good thing because that helps generate in research interest. Like we're all here today, we want to do something about that problem that is becoming more and more of an issue for our society. So I think that's one explanation for that seemingly, kind of more prominent Alzheimer's disease recent in our consciousness. But did you guys have any other thoughts about that? If I understand your question correctly.
Those are things that we're working on in research. Things, the Lancet Commission has a report about different things that are factors in Alzheimer's. So one of the things that's been studied is pollution, the environment in which you reside. But also, getting back to something that Dr. Jim said, how you start off, the genetics of your family, what's going on. And not only that, the kinds of environment, how the exposome, how many exposures do you give people? What kind of education do you have? That's cultural. It's not just book learning. Felicia?
Yeah, we're also interested too. We have study going on right now. Myself and Dr. Trammell are part of a national study looking at risk factors for, well, not risk factors, but really protective factors for super aging. Why are there people who turn 80 and older and don't get Alzheimer's disease and age very successfully? So in our study at Emory, we're recruiting people 80 and older and looking at protective factors that may protect against someone having a decline, even though they may have some risk factors for the disease. And we're finding out some really interesting things. People, for example, who are super agers, who age very successfully, are very socially engaged, very cognitively engaged. They're healthy. They watch their vascular risk factors. So we're starting to learn more about really successful aging and resilience. More mentioned.
All right, so superagers are people who are 80 and older, if you're wondering, but their memory is akin to a person who is 50 or 60. So one thing that we have learned over the time, imagine you break your leg, but you can still run a marathon. That's a pretty cool concept, right? Well, the brain can have disease, but it doesn't necessarily have to affect how you remember and think. So it's fascinating to try and figure out what helps people either, one, have disease in their brain like Alzheimer's, but their thinking and memory is not affected. Two, to not be affected by those conditions at all, to not have it on up into their 80s or 90s.
Next.
I read about a study that if your HDL cholesterol, which I assume is your good cholesterol, was high, that you had a greater chance of, like a 30% greater chance of Alzheimer's or heart disease with high HDL. And I wonder if you even heard about that or if it was just...
I haven't heard about that one. We know Alzheimer's disease, like Dr. Levy said, is probably a collection of diseases. Right, we call it Alzheimer's disease. So one major feature of many people that have Alzheimer's disease is vascular disease in their brains. So the blood vessels are not working properly. And we know that HDL, LDL, these things that you think about in regards to heart disease are actually probably pretty important for brain health as well. because your brain is highly vascular, right? You have a lot of blood vessels in the brain. So I haven't heard about the HDL risk per se, but I think we want to pay attention to vascular risk factors when we're talking about Alzheimer's disease prevention.
So it's basically kind of a two-part question. Number one, I just was interested in hearing about, since we're talking about the ApoE genetic situation with CRISPR technology. Is there any thought in being able to maybe rewrite those genes? And then secondary question, for those of us who have parents who have the genes and have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and are involved in the study, is there a way for us to find out what genes we have and do that blood test? I mean, just wondering kind of if that's something that's on the horizon.
So for those of you who are not biotech aficionados, CRISPR technology is this really cool genetic technology that allows you to go in and actually rewrite letters in your genetic code. It's a very cool technology. And it's now being applied clinically in certain situations. And it's applicable to conditions that are driven genetically. And the ApoE gene is an interesting problem because some of the engineering that you can do, like in blood cells. So there's been some treatments targeting conditions like sickle cell disease or some other blood diseases where the blood cells are being regenerated. And so you can relatively easily, you can go wipe out the bone marrow and then reintroduce cells that don't have that genetic mutation. So it's a relatively easier task. Whereas if you're talking about adjusting the genetic code to change that ApoE4 to an ApoE3, you have to do that throughout the body, and it's a much more challenging thing. So I think there are studies being done to look at ways to alter ApoE functioning, but I'm not familiar with sort of systemic CRISPR technology being used. For the disclosures, yes. So and not all genes. So how many of you have done 23andMe or something similar? What the hell did you do that for?
It was a gift.
Yeah, I've heard that before too. Somebody came to see me in clinic and said, my husband gave me 23andMe and I'm going to get Alzheimer's disease. So there are a lot of genes that you can test for that may be more or less important. The ApoE gene is an important gene. There's nothing you can do to change it. But for those of you who want to know what my relative risk is, we're going to disclose that information to you once you have the sort of information and background to correctly interpret that data. When we say it's not actionable, some people will say, well, yeah, it's actionable. If you tell me I have an Alzheimer's risk gene, I'm going to start eating better and I'm going to exercise more. I'm going to go find some volunteer work to do. And that's actionable. And those things are legitimate. And so you will get that information.
So just one other comment on the first question about the gene editing part. So it does get more complex in the brain when you're thinking about just overcoming the issue with the blood-brain barrier. So as you know, your brain is a privileged organ. It has lots of blood flow, which it has to have to survive, but all the components in the blood can't easily get into the brain. And so that makes it hugely challenging for delivering any type of therapy. That being said, they are using some alternate approaches to gene editing, and one of those is more of a gene silencing. And so in the field of motor neuron disease and others, you can actually give these little tiny nucleotides or pieces of genetic material that you can inject into the spinal fluid by doing a lumbar puncture. Those little molecules go up into the brain or spinal cord and can kind of block the bad gene that may be causing part of the problem. And so that is a possibly alternative approach to maybe knocking down some of the expression of the genes that may be causing the problem. It still has one of the challenges of, Well, the brain is very complex. And how do you get that to all the different cells in the brain that actually may need it for you to make a difference? And the bigger question is, when do you need to do that to make a difference? And that's also something that I think has made it really challenging for this field because, these protein changes occur over several decades. And, if you start now and have already had proteins in your brain for years, is it a little bit too late? So that's also part of it.
But you're all in the best place because you're here where all of it happens. And so if we have an opportunity to share with you, we're going to share it with you.
Can I just quick one on that, on the CRISPR part. That's probably going to come first when we're talking about fertility. And when people, if they know they have 2 copies of ApoE4 and maybe their wife has 1 copy as well, to think about that in terms of gene editing before conception.
One question for Marla was, how do you donate your brain? What's that process?
So you all, when you participate in the studies, you get a booklet about considering brain donation, and the clinicians will talk to you about brain donation. And if you're interested in doing that, there's a phone number on there that you can call, and I can take you through the process more carefully. But basically, what happens is you get a card with a 24-hour answering service number that you can call, that your next of kin, the next of kin of the decedent can call at the time of death. They call, it's usually me talking to them. I take consent for the autopsy. In Georgia, by law, we cannot do that ahead of time. So if you want to donate your own brain, you can't sign consent forms for your own autopsy. You can't do that. So we do consent. I arrange for transportation. We bring the body to Emory, remove the brain and the spinal cord, and then we contact the funeral home that your family has chosen, and they come pick up the body, and you proceed with your final affairs, the services or whatever. Was there? Yes.
I find out, right? Is that automatic?
The question was the brain versus brain and spinal cord. If spinal cord's automatically part of the, considered part of the brain donation or not. It is possible to donate only your brain. We take, at the time of death, we take consent for brain and spinal cord if the family is willing. Spinal cord actually lends important information as well. There's some disorders where it's critical, like ALS, for example, Lou Gehrig's disease. But for Alzheimer's, there's important information in the spinal cord as well. So we typically ask for it. If for some reason a family is not comfortable with that and only wants to do a brain donation, that's fine too. But we do that at the time of death.
Cornelia?
We have like 30 questions. So
I've signed on for this. I carry the card in my wallet, and Richard Folger was my cousin. He was photographed over there today. One thing that I want y'all to find a way to send us an email, send us a link, send us an article, something that we can give our cousins and other people that have got this in their family and they don't want to admit it. Because sharing this information is important to us. I'll talk to red off a stop sign about how important this program is. That's how much I believe in it. But we need to be able to go to our friends and share this with them and say, you need to call this number. You need to go to this link. You need to read about it. That would be great if we've got it. Thank you for your work. I'm sitting there.
This was talking about sharing the information. I'll just make one comment that it's also very important. It's not just the brain donation. All of the information that is collected before death is absolutely critical as well, because when you pair that with the brain donation, that is when the brain is most valuable, because we can go back and look at the clinical records and see, we saw this. Does that correlate with that? So really, it's both parts, but the clinical folks and the education folks are hearing this. Yes. So if you move out of state, we can still arrange brain donation. It's helpful to be contacted when you're moving, so that we can try and make an arrangement with a local pathologist to remove the brain and ship it to us. But it can be done. And we've also had some last minute ones where somebody was on vacation and passed suddenly. So it can be done. Yes. You want
you mentioned a medication now that is available. Could we hear the name of that?
That's Eric and
It's called lecanemab. Yeah, that's the generic name, LECANEMAB, lecanemab. It's also known as Leqembi. That's the brand name. That's the medication that Dr. Law was talking about that was approved by the FDA this past July.
Yeah. Okay. I was wondering, how do you think the internet has to do with functionality with people recognizing that they have Alzheimer's? Because basically, we can use AI, we can look up answers on the internet. So, have you studied that for people like that?
Thank you for that question. That's a great question. I was thinking about bringing up AI earlier because we collect all this information, and AI gives us a way to take all the information together to use it most effectively to help people. We're also starting to use the availability of the internet, computers, smartphones, right? They're the best computers we have that everybody has. How to use those to understand if people are having changes in their brain functions, for example, and figure out how to use that information to help them and help us learn. The other thing we're increasingly going to see in the Alzheimer's Center work that we're all doing together is asking people to see if they'll do things on their smartphone or an iPad at home. So rather than just coming in once a year, wouldn't it be cool if you could just do some of these things at home? Even the surveys that we do, you could save a lot of time, do it together as a family, and collect that information. So it'll be a lot more efficient, but we think the power of these small computers to capture how people are doing things, using their calendar, remember, speaking, even the way people speak, we're learning is very predictive about who's going to get Alzheimer's disease or another condition in the future. So be on the lookout for that. We'd love to have people volunteer for that as we go forward.
Cornelia?
Is there any problem with, if you're participating in the Alzheimer's research, participating in some other study or trial?
Generally speaking, no. What we do in the honor cohort is what's called an observational study. And that means that we're collecting information about you. We may be asking you to do fun memory testing and donate blood and things like that. But we're not intervening with a drug. And one of the things that we do routinely when we're reviewing our research volunteers at our consensus conference, after you come in every year, we review the information. And we look to consider whether that individual might be a good candidate for a different trial. And so it does not preclude our research volunteers from participating in other studies.
Thank you.
Thank you. We were talking just a moment ago about how to notify friends and relatives and so on and so forth. I carry the card that Dr. Law and his crew provided me when I signed off on the big paper donating my brain when I didn't need it. But I'm a person that travels extensively and not quite as frequently as I used to. But when I'm out of town as much of the year as I am, that just exacerbates the likelihood of not finding a friendly.
I would make sure that your next of kin also has a copy of that card. Because in the event that something should happen, if you're out in, say you're out in Arizona and something happens, your next of kin can call the 24-hour number and they're going to be notified if something happens. Whoever's going to get that notification, just make sure that, those folks have that information. They can call that 24-hour number and we can get to work.
Another along the same line, but probably a little extreme. I'm one of the superagers, and as a part of a study that I did and had my DNA tested, not 23andMe or any of the normal runs like that, but through a neuropsychologist that wanted to know something before he prescribed an unusual medicine. I discovered through the fact that you could research these studies that determine your DNA profile, and in a access manner by somebody else totally unrelated and you've never met and probably never will. I discovered that I have a daughter that I didn't know about. And so I don't really know how to get a hold of her, and all we've been talking about today and being involved is relevant to this kind of thing, because that's certainly an aspect that might be valuable later on. So keep that aspect in mind as well.
So while we're passing the mic, if you turn to one of your pages where it says Memory at Emory, one of our coordinators who coordinates the study that all of you are a part of, Samantha Heldenberg, has her telephone number there, 404-712-7542. It's in your brochure. She's in the back. After this, please give her a call, but moving forward, we're going to make sure that we have this information. It's contained in our upcoming newsletter, and we'll make sure that this is available every time we have an educational event. But again, it's not just donate your brain. If you're a part of this study and we have a relationship with you, that gives us the best data and information. Yes, sir.
Good morning, everybody. I want to know, when everybody that plays games on the internet, and and these apps come in and ask you to try their app, what good of the apps that say that they can tell you the age of your brain? If you play this game, what good is that? And one other question: what happens to the body after we donate it?
For those of you, it's brain age is concept similar to your bone age, right? So you could look at your chronological age, just take what the moment is, and then subtract when you were born, and that's your what we would call chronological age. But different person ages differently, so we can actually take your MRIs of your brain, and then look at how much atrophy it goes on, and then calculate what we would call a brain age. So we are actually in the process of doing that model. It involves AI and all that to do a prediction of your brain age, and at some point we will include that information as part of all that APO and other information that could be disclosed to you.
What type of writing to look into that?
So you're trying to say is the computer brain helping my brain not to age? Is that what your question is?
Not much.
And
the other piece of the question was what happens to the body after you donate your brain. It goes to whatever funeral home you have chosen for your arrangements. So it goes, we remove the brain and the spinal cord and then contact that funeral home and they come pick it up. Yep. If you want an open casket, brain donation is compatible with open casket. I speak from personal experience because both of my grandparents donated their brains and they were in the Salvation Army where open casket was the way you went. So it was absolutely fine. It's compatible with brain donation. They were absolutely lovely, yes.
One more? Okay, we're at 12:04, so I'm looking at my bosses. You noticed everybody refers to somebody as a boss? Okay, that's the ultimate boss right there. Cornelia?
It's pressure. This is the last question. It better be a good one.
You folks are doing very fascinating and noble work. We thank you. And my question is, does this center interact with similar disease like Parkinson or essential tremor? Which one comes first, or which one, or there's no correlation?
Yeah, I'm not sure I got all of the question, but so correct me if I'm not answering it appropriately. But Parkinson's disease is very much part of this family of diseases that we're talking about, and we are very interested in. We do study Parkinson's disease and the changes that happen in memory and thinking that occur almost as part of the spectrum of Alzheimer's disease. So we have a new cohort that we're including. So in future years, you'll probably see more people who may have some signs of Parkinson's disease that come in, or a condition called Lewy body dementia. Oh, essential tremor. We collect that information, not so much directly in the Alzheimer's Center, but this larger initiative that we're doing as part of the Goizet Institute, where we are including, trying to learn more about that condition as well. So we are going to be here. So I know we're out of time for questions. We want to be respectful for those who want to leave. Feel free to come up and ask us questions if you haven't had a chance. But just one more opportunity to say thank you, thank you, thank you. So
as those who need to leave, I want to draw your attention to the Join Us for Future events. What we do consistently is every single week to keep you educated and informed about what's going on in aging and brain health. We have a weekly Brain Talk Live on Tuesdays at 2. Our Cognitive Empowerment Program has a webinar every Wednesday at 3. And our next big forum will be at the Carter Center on Tuesday, April 9th. There's a theme here. We do a lot of our stuff on Tuesday, and we do it that way because that's what you told us you wanted, something in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day. And there are several opportunities throughout the year for you to participate in educational forums sponsored by our Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Please tune in to our Brain Talk Live. We have a YouTube channel where lots of scientists from all over the country have given talks on health and brain aging and can answer many of these questions. If you're a part of our longitudinal study, our memory study, if you're a part of the Emory Healthy Brain Study, you'll be given more opportunities to participate in, I like to call them add-on studies, as a result of different things that we're aware of. So science is an ever-evolving thing. Thank you for your participation. You're welcome to leave. We're here to answer questions. Thank you.